Okay, and we're live.
Hi,
All right.
welcome to our weekly discussion series that is being sponsored by the Chaldean Cultural Center with collaboration of University of Michigan Detroit chapter and Unique Voices in Films. And today we have our first international talent, Hajer. I hope I said it right, Hajer. And she is a young Iraqi Australian writer. We met because she invited me to Iraqi Diaspora Creatives, which is a Facebook group that's just filled with so many Iraq talent from Iraqi backgrounds. And she's going to share that with us along with her story of how she decided to be a writer and how she has succeeded at such a young age. Hi, Hajer, how are you?
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very early. It's 8 a.m., but I'm happy to be here.
Good. We got you up early so you can have a great day, right?
Great. Yeah.
So we have a lot of questions for you, beginning with, you were born in Australia, correct?
Yep.
And then, so when did you start, when did you decide that you wanted to be a writer, and how did your background influence your writing?
So to be honest, my mum always pushed me into writing, which is like pretty unconventional, I think, for Middle Eastern parents to do that. But she really wanted me, like she thought that it was a very honorable kind of way to go. She told me to be a big avid reader, so I read a lot growing up. I was reading chapter books from like early primary school. So excuse me. So yeah, I just it was inevitable for me to almost inevitable for me to go into this course. But as I got to high school, especially towards the later years, I became a little bit more political. I was more interested in Middle Eastern politics and history. There wasn't a lot of people at that age who were interested in things like that. So I only found solace in really, boring textbooks about that stuff. And just spoke to the teachers all the time about these things. Really just wanted to find somewhere to speak about the opinions I was forming and the stories that came to mind. But I didn't really officially or seriously take writing into consideration until about 17, 18, when I started trying to deal with the existential crises that I was getting, as you do at that age. It's very typical coming of age kind of era of my life. And I just started writing a lot. And then eventually I went to uni, and after school I volunteered at various arts centers, local arts centers, started meeting people my age who were also creative and interested in history and politics, like the intellectuals. And they introduced me to the local literary scene, and I became involved and started taking my writing seriously. I joined a group called the Finishing School Collective, which is specifically focused on mentoring women writing books in Western Sydney, which is where I grew up. And through that, I started sending my writing to the woman who runs it, and she edited my writing and gave the whole group like various opportunities to find an audience for our writing. And we did readings and an audio installation with these kind of weird curtain things with our faces and little like speakers with all of our writing on loop. So that was the exposure I got, and ever since then I've just kind of been adding to that experience and figuring out my voice and my writing. Yeah.
First of all, I have to say, so you have a very wise mother.
Oh, yes.
Because yeah, writing is a very, it's a very strong tool for us to express ourselves and to make a difference. And seems like that's what you're doing. So so you have a very wise mother. Then based on what you're saying, maybe if you tell us a little bit about the themes, what I've noticed about your work is there's a lot of themes that, are repeated, but in various ways. So tell us about the themes that you have chosen and why you have chosen them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I chose them. They just it was just writing what I was dealing with. So I was, I grew up in Australia, but with very proud Iraqi mother specifically. My parents are divorced, so I grew up mostly with my mum, and she really ingrained being proud of being Iraqi and being Muslim and all of that stuff. And so, but at the same time, I was also raised outside of the Iraqi community because, there was a lot of clashes as usual with our community. And so,
Yes,
and so, yeah, and so we we grew up like very outside of it, but also she made us really proud of it and ingrained like that patriotic kind of fervor, but always felt very lost in between the two worlds, and just started writing about that. I didn't find there was a lot of older Middle Eastern and Muslim writers in Australia writing about experiences that I just couldn't really relate to, the only kind of Muslim Middle Eastern voices that existed. And they mostly just talk about racism, which is obviously important, but to be honest, like I grew up in a very diverse place where the majority in one, I moved around a lot, but in one of the areas, the majority was Muslim, and on Eid, there's like 1% of the school is there. So it's very just not my experience. Of course, racism is always going to exist, but in terms of my personal experience as a Muslim Arab woman in Australia growing up, like born and raised in Australia, it wasn't racism that I was confused by or like oppressed by or just dealing with. It was more being told by my community that I'm Iraqi and nothing else, and then being told, or Muslim and nothing else, and then being told by outside of that is that, oh, but like you can't call Iraq your country because you've hardly ever been there, and your experience is so different to that. And trying to find like the balance and the truth in both of those statements, and how to claim the third space, if you've heard of that term, of the third culture kind of experience, which a lot of diaspora kids across the ethnic spectrums actually experience. So that's what I explore a lot, is being stuck between the two and finding that is an identity in itself. It's not something separate. It's not, you can't, it feels like the community is trying to pull you here and claim you, and then the Western world is trying to claim you. But I'm like, no, remove the shackles. I'm in the middle, and I like that. And the gray area, which I think generally society doesn't really like. They just like one answer to questions rather than gray area.
Yes, and and we've talked before, because I became part of the Facebook group, and then that's how we connected. But we also have had a couple of conversations about some of the matters that we'll discuss today. Before we go into that, actually, because I see some of your recent work here, like working on a first folklore piece. It says, and I'm not going to be able to say this correctly. Is it called the Tigritian Woman?
It's a made-up word, so it's the Tigritian women. So I was exploring.
Yes, set in an imagined ancient matriarchal Mesopotamian society. I'm very interested in that. It seems like from some of the stuff that you described regarding your work, that you explore themes of womanhood, dysfunctional families, which we all have. And
Is there even such thing as a functional family?
yeah, right. I mean, if you're not from a dysfunctional family, then you're not normal, right? So, but I'm particularly interested in the ones that where you focus on the women, and especially with the new piece that you're working. What is that about? I'm curious.
Yeah, so that was me trying to imagine what Iraq would have been like prior to anything that we recognize now, or what we call Iraq now. Of course, like it's had many names. That whole region has had many names, but I was trying to figure, like, just imagine a world in that Mesopotamian kind of region that completely looks like a different place, dominated by women, dominated.
And there used to be such a thing, by the way.
Yeah, well, I don't even
I'm
know.
interested.
I just made it up because it was so hard to find. There's so much reading. So I just like made it up. I was like, okay, there's two rivers, and it's well known that the reason that there was civilization in those in Mesopotamia was because those rivers were fertile, like allowed life, because you have to build life around water. So it made sense to me that like a village or a community would be living along the river. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna have to pick a river. So I picked the Tigris, and because there's two. And then I was like, okay, what if it's completely a matriarchal society and there's no men? Like, what would that actually look like? And just imagine it. And of course, you know, the dilemma is like, how do they reproduce? But that's the question. I just pushed that aside because I didn't want to think about it yet. And just,
Yeah, okay.
but then I was trying to explore pre-Islamic life as well, because I grew up Muslim, and I think another issue, kind of difficulty I had, was trying to detangle Iraqi identity to Islamic identity, because, you know, I don't necessarily practice anymore, and I wanted to understand what we would look like if Islam didn't exist, or if religion as we know it didn't exist. And there would have to have been something else, and so they had their own kind of system. And I just, yeah, that piece was just in order to imagine what a world would have been like in that area without the current everything.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I think that anybody that's born in a certain country or has that background is going to have an interest in it, regardless of what their religion. So you and I are born of different religions, but we still have that passion and that interest in our well, it's I was born there and you weren't, but you still have that sense for it, and trying to get a sense of identity by learning about it. And when writers just fall into, once they start exploring, start finding out so many things that go past and beyond their religions, and then when you find out,
Just their
like,
worlds in general. Just
yes,
their
yes,
world. Yeah.
yes, and you actually even fall in love more with that land, and because you start seeing that, wow, there was thousands of years ago this is going on, and then and you can really kind of not to, you don't even have to let go of who you are on a religious basis, but you can't deny that these things were there, and they're very beautiful and wonderful and mysterious things. And this leads to one of our first conversations was about a letter that you and your group initiated about a series called Baghdad Central.
Mhm.
So I've seen Baghdad Central. It's I believe, I don't know if,
You watched it? Yeah.
yes. Is it Netflix or was it Hulu? It's on one.
No, it's actually so it's in, depending where you live, it's in different places. So in the UK,
Oh,
it's in Channel 4. I think it's on Hulu now in like
okay.
Canada.
Yeah, we watched
US.
it. Yeah, it was one of the series that we watched because, like, my husband and I, we do like to watch things and that relate to the Middle East and things like that.
Yeah, same. That's why I watched it in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I did not do the kind of research that you did into it, and I think that was interesting that you did that. So tell us a little bit about what you discovered when you initially seen it, and how did this campaign start, where
Hmm.
ended up reaching out to the creators of Baghdad Central.
Yeah, so it was an interesting process. So I'm very hyper aware of when things in the West are centered around Iraq. I'm very hyper aware of who's written them, the intentions, who owns the copyright, which is a really overlooked thing. It's actually a lot of power to own copyright and a lot of power to own the profits of a story. And so when I watched it, immediately I noticed that the actors got the Iraqi. I'm sure they tried very hard, but they are not Iraqi, and they got the Iraqi accent quite wrong a lot of the time. That was something that really jumped out, and I was like, like, that's okay, but I wonder why that is. And most of the actors were surprisingly Palestinian, and there's a step a little bit away from at least the Arab, and at least there's that. But then at the same time, who wrote this? Because if an Iraqi wrote this, that probably wouldn't have been an issue. And then I looked into it, and it was adapted from a book written by an white American man who wrote a book called Baghdad Central, written from an Iraqi perspective, which I have a lot of issues with, especially in American writing something supposedly about Iraq, supposedly from an Iraqi perspective, with very clear. I mean, I haven't read the book, so I can't fully speak on the book, but by the end of the show, I realized that the American general, or whatever he was kind of like the leader of the American army. He ended up being the voice of reason, and kind of like this white savior complex just ended up emerging in the story. And of course, I had an issue with that, and so I looked into it. I watched a lot of interviews. There was one Iraqi producer on the team, but she was brought in a bit later, when everything was already decided by predominantly a white team. Yeah, it was a completely white gaze. It was produced by a British production company, which is 100% white owned and run and profited off. So I had a big issue that this Iraqi story that all the proceeds of this story, all the profits of this story, which is a huge, huge, like, if you've seen it, you can tell it's a very big budget. And it is now in the US, in Canada, in Australia, in the UK. It's not small, it's huge. And everywhere that you get a bigger and bigger audience, the more places you stream it. And so the profits are huge on this show. And it's not going to any Iraqis, unfortunately. And that I had a big issue with that. So I started this conversation with members of the Facebook group, asking how they felt about it. And also, when I was watching the interviews, a lot of journalists did ask them why were there not many lead or kind of major Iraqi actors on the show who were playing the main characters. And they kept coming back with the same answers that I felt was very untrue. They said, oh, there's just none out there. We tried very hard, all of that. But then in the 3-4 months that I've run this group, I have found over 20, 30 Iraqi actors from all over the world who speak fluent English, who speak fluent Arabic. And I did that with me on my own, and that's it. Whereas they have all these resources, supposedly 18 months of research. So I just felt like none of it was true. I spoke to a few actors in the UK, Iraqi background, well known, and they said they didn't even get invited to an audition. So all the excuses that they came with just felt really untrue. I spoke to the group and we had a massive discussion about it, and I wasn't the only one that felt this way. And so I said, should we do something about it? And there came a lot of, obviously, that they came back with a yes, and a lot of people had also been really hurt by the system. As we've spoken about, you and I have also been, it's just really problematic, and white supremacy is not okay. And if you've been in the industry for long enough, you've been told that people aren't interested in this stuff, or all sorts of things. And so I just felt like I had to do something about it. And so I wrote, predominantly spearheaded it and wrote the open letter, but with a lot of help from various other people in the group who edited and changed things. And it was quite a collaborative process. And through that, I think I learned a lot about my own community being the intellectual side of my community that I hadn't been exposed to very much. And we built kind of this, like now one of my close friends from the group, Samia Rahmani, who is your your lead actress for your new film.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, she, her and I kind of like have a little book club now, just like us two.
Oh, wonderful.
Naturally emerged. We just started, she recommended something to me and I read it, and now we're reading another thing. And it was really nice within the frustration of the system and protest against this show and many others like it. It's not the only one, that we learnt of each other. You know, like I think a lot of the time, you've probably experienced, it feels like we're always frustrated in isolation. But then with this group that I've started, I've found that it's not like that at all. There's a lot of people frustrated about these things. A lot of people have had firsthand racist experiences, subtle or overt, and being told that, you know, oh, like you're being asked to consult an Iraqi story and then being told, oh no, but we asked someone else and they said this, or they said this, so I don't agree, just because they want to do it their way anyway. So it just, and then like using our labor, using our stories, profiting off those stories, and then not having anyone in the room from those groups, or one person if they do, that don't, you know, and then they use us as human shields against each other. It's not okay. And so I just had to do something about it. But through that, I've met so many people like yourself and like Samia and like many others in the group who are also doing a lot to fight this stuff and making their own things. There's lots of really interesting stories being in the process of being made that I'm very excited about.
Yeah,
So
yeah. One thing that we also, I think we agreed on is it's good, you know, that you guys are addressing this, but at the same time, not getting just caught up in just the complaint factor, but saying we're going to face this, we're going to address it, and we are providing a space where we can create something that we want. You know, it's funny when you were saying some of these things. I remember I went one time to a conference in Vancouver and talked to two major Hollywood producers about my story that I was working on at that time. And they kind of just looked at me and said, you know, well, who would we cast? I mean, you know, like who would we
yeah.
or something. And I'm thinking, well, Dustin Hoffman played a woman, and you can't find somebody that can play a Middle Easterner.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can be an Italian, Spanish, anybody. So yeah, there was that attitude. And I remember that when I walked away, that my feeling was, I did realize that, you know, for me to be able to break into certain industries, that I would have to find my own way, because it was very obvious from that kind of answer that didn't make sense. Similarly to, and I'm telling you, this was like, maybe this was over 15 years ago that I forgot the year, I think it was in 2003 that I went there. And based on that answer, and then here we are, you know, many years later, almost, 17 years later, and it's kind of, well, we couldn't find the actors. But when we were casting for a feature that I'm currently working on, actually we were just
came to you.
Iraqi, a lot of actors of Iraqi background. We weren't even really looking. They were just submitting because the story felt relatable, and this is how we found them. They submitted in breakdown services. We didn't even have to look for them. We just put an audition out there. So I see what you mean. And the good thing about something like this is, I think that when people see whatever industry it is that we care about ourselves enough to defend it, they might think twice the next time, that they would at least have some kind of, acknowledge that we exist, we do exist. And there's a lot of wonderful talent out there, and we have our version of our stories. So that's one thing. But then the other thing, it does open dialogues amongst ourselves. And hey, what can we do? So, okay, so this is how it's being done. What can we do to have that voice, and kind of support each other in that way? So it's not like we're just pointing fingers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I just recently wrote, and in response to all of this, a little kind of article recommending about little under 10 different things to read and watch that are set during the Iraq War, because that's when Baghdad Center was set, as an alternative, and they're all Iraqi owned and Iraqi created. And it's like, yes, there is I guess, like, I wrote that in response to, oh, but why aren't Iraqis doing this? Well, they are, but you're just not paying attention and you're not looking. And also what I do with the group is I really like to do, so I'll pick like an art form and then just highlight 5 or 10 different artists of Iraqi background in that art form. So for instance, I started with writers, and every day I'll just be like, meet this person. They write about this stuff. Go support them, follow them on their socials, read about their work. And it's exposure to each other, but also to the wider world, that there are so many people doing stuff. We're just all in small pockets. And I think that that was the bigger intention for the Iraqi Diaspora Creatives Network, was to build a one united like platform highlighting all of us and making sure that there's kind of because I think our diaspora is so scattered compared to a lot of other diasporas, and there's little clusters. Like in Australia, we have a lot of quite a big Assyrian population, and a little bit of smaller like Shia and the newer kind of wave that came after the ISIS wars. But even those groups don't really interact very much. And so I just really felt frustrated after a while of trying to find mentors, or like just Iraqis to help me with my writing and mentor me with my writing, who understood the culture, so I didn't have to explain anything. Because the last thing you want when you write a story is to explain the cultural specificity that is mentioned, that is not a big deal part of the story. It's a very normalized part of the story. And they get bogged down in trying to understand that before they can actually even edit. So I just didn't want, I was looking, and I found it very hard to find many people in the diaspora. So I said, why don't I just create a platform, promote it? And I was very lucky to have shokumaku.net, if you've heard of them. They
No,
are a really
but I
cool
like the name.
online Iraqi, yeah, they're an online platform for Iraqis, just celebrating everything and anything Iraqi. And they promoted the group in the beginning, and I had like quite a lot of people join. So now we've got over 700 people on the Instagram page, and
Wow.
200, just over 200 on the Facebook page. So yeah, there's a lot of us out there.
This is really how it starts, because at the end of the day, really, you have to be, we have to represent ourselves as first and foremost as individuals, because we don't
Yeah,
all fall into the same category. We all have different stories and different experiences.
intersections, yeah.
But if we want our stories heard, at the end of the day, it is what we do. And then we will be heard. And I know a lot of people, because I've been supported by a lot of people that are non-Iraqis, non-Middle Easterners, who really were supportive of my work and said, we want to hear more. We love what you have to say. We would like to hear more. And really, it's people like that that kept me going. And just the fact that I like you, I had an experience like a long time ago where I saw that we were being represented in very just like a stereotype, a stereotype that exists, and it was just about women being abused. And not that that doesn't exist in the Middle East, but it's not everybody's experience. And so when I searched for stories that were outside of that box, there was nothing out there. So I said, okay, well, the only thing that was in my power to do is write the stories that I knew. And so from that, I became a journalist, because it became more important to write true life stories of that region. And our culture is not all about just war and terrorism and things. And religion, it's actually, there's so much love and culture and beauty and history.
And humor,
And what?
so much humor.
Oh yes, yes, we're filled with that. There's a lot of beauty and power. There's a lot of powerful women from that region. And so I'm always very delighted to find talented people such as yourself, because like we're, you know, Iraqis are all from the Mesopotamian region, and we all need to find out more of where our origins are, because thousands of years ago, we had a space where we actually had that platform. And it's our duty to bring that back to light. So one last thing, so I would love to hear, I mean, how can people, you know, connect with you, look up your work? One thing I saw that I really enjoyed this, it's called, I told you, Halal Girls. Because I know, you know, I thought it was just a very simple, lighthearted, just a beautiful episode that you had, or a series that you had. I liked it. I enjoyed the humor, and it was about women. You told me that it was written by the women that were, I think, yeah. So, and you could, I didn't know that. Oftentimes I don't look at the details because I just kind of try to grasp the authenticity.
Just to engage with it. Yeah.
I really felt that. I told you that I felt like, yeah, like these look like my friends.
More relatable. Yeah, so it's on YouTube, Halal Girls. Yeah, it's about 3 women born and raised in Australia, but Muslim, all very different, and they are just trying to live their lives. It's not about really their identity, like a little bit, you know, of course, but it's just about them and their shenanigans, and that's what I really like about it.
Yes.
It's
that's why it was fun to watch. That's why it was fun. So if somebody wants to see your work or get involved with the Iraqi diaspora creatives, like how can they reach you, or how can they get connected?
So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Hajer, Hajer. You can just search up Iraqi Diaspora Creatives on both Facebook. It's a closed group on there, but if you're Iraqi, I'll let you in. And and then and then on Instagram, it's open to everyone. So same thing, Iraqi Diaspora Creatives. So follow us on there.
And those, and your group, I mean, I visited there. It's like there's people from all over the world.
Yeah, places that you would never imagine, like Slovenia.
Right, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I read one place that it was like, I didn't even know, you know, like I didn't even know of this place, let alone that there's anybody of Iraqi background that lives there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we get to see a lot of talents that the people, what they're doing. It's very inspiring. I think what happens when you are with a group like this is when you see other people, what they're creating, and they have the same background, and then you realize, oh, you know, you're not kind of lost in this void. There are a lot of people that are doing wonderful things, and you get inspired and you can make connections. So I really thank you for creating that group, and that caring so much about that region, that regardless of what you do with your work, least like you're that region, and we appreciate, you know, you taking the time to come and share your story. And given how young you are and how much you've accomplished, I'm sure that you'll be doing a lot of work and producing a lot of work, and we're going to be looking forward to it, so we can have you back. Thank you so much. Is there any last words that you want to share? Any inspirational words you want to give somebody that might be like,
I don't know if I have inspirational words, but you know what I just always say, just keep reading, writing, engaging in art, and just do what you want to do. Don't be dictated by anyone. That's all I have to say.
That's very good advice, very wise advice. So again, thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you,
everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Posting this and some interview questions that I have with Hajer. So we'll just keep watching for the Chaldean Cultural Center Facebook page. Thank you.